The Denver Broncos have lived through their fair share of draft day heartbreaks. Ask a modern fan and they'll point to Paxton Lynch, the first round quarterback who was more interested in a game controller than a playbook. Go back a little farther, it's Marcus Nash, the receiver who caught 4 passes. Not in a game, not in a season, in his career. But to find out who the worst draft bust in Broncos history is, the one that echoes like a warning shot across the decades, you have to go back to 1988. This was the year that the Broncos had just finished back-to-back Super Bowls, riding the rocket arm of John Elway, only to see their defense collapse in historic, unforgettable fashion. So they entered this draft with one mission: fix the defense, especially the defensive line. Now, the draft in the 1980s is not the polished, primetime spectacle that you see today. The combine was still kind of in its infancy. Not every team attended. There's no endless pro days, no poking and prodding that they do. There's not data analysts crunching terabytes of numbers. And in Denver, one man held the reins: head coach Dan Reeves. Now, he had a general manager, he had a scouting department, but the decisions were all his, every last one. And he'd made mistakes before, but none could compare to what happened in 1988. Syracuse University had just finished an 11-0 season, their first undefeated run in nearly 30 years. Their defense was a wall, and in the middle of it stood defensive lineman named Ted Gregory. Now, when he was in the lineup, they had the number one run defense in the nation. When he was injured, they plummeted to 105th. He was a consensus All-American. He was a star. He was a force. But he was also injured badly. A major knee injury had cost him games. But he had a reputation that was spotless. And that reputation was all Dan Reeves needed, because he made him the 26th overall pick without ever having met him. Not a lunch, not a conversation, not even a passing glance. Their first meeting came after the draft, and that's when Reeves realized something was terribly wrong. Teddy Gregory had been listed as 6'1", 260 pounds, which back in the 80s was a respectable enough size for a defensive lineman. But when they met, when Reeves saw him in person, he reportedly blurted out, "That is the shortest 6'1" I have ever seen." And Reeves was right. He wasn't even close to 6'1". He was actually 5'9" and much lighter than he was built. And that knee was a ticking time bomb. As you can imagine, Gregory never lived up to his draft status. His knee gave out in training camp, and the media pounced, labeled him damaged goods, ridiculed the Broncos for drafting someone sight unseen, and desperate to salvage anything, the Broncos traded him to the New Orleans Saints before the season even began. Gregory never played a single down for the Denver Broncos. And that defense he was supposed to fix finished 20th out of 28 teams, and the Broncos limped to an 8-8 record in 1988. Fortunately, the damage wasn't terrible. The Broncos rebounded and made it back to the Super Bowl in 1989. And the Broncos quietly changed their draft process forever. From that point on, they would meet with draft prospects before they were taken in the draft. Teddy Gregory's story isn't quite finished. He played 3 games for the New Orleans Saints in 1988. And in Week 12, in a 42-0 demolition of the Broncos, Teddy Gregory recorded his only sack of his NFL career. He sacked John Elway. And that fleeting moment was the final chapter in Ted Gregory's painful, short, and historically infamous NFL journey.